Whispers of Gallow's End. Elise Hendrickson's boots crunched on the autumn leaves that blanketed the cobblestone path leading into Gallow's End. The village was an enigma, draped in stories of the supernatural and whispers of the past that echoed through the desolate street. Elise, with her camera slung over her shoulder, was determined to capture the eerie beauty of this place long forsaken by time. The air in Gallow's End was thick with mist that clung to the skin like a damp cloak. Elise's breath came out in white puffs as she clicked her camera, the old device seeming almost in harmony with the time-worn scenery. Her intent was to create a photo essay that would breathe life into the ghostly whispers of the village. She came across Ian, an old-timer with eyes as deep as the mysteries that shrouded the village. "The beauty here is just a facade," he said, his voice a soft warning. "Don't stir the peace of the ones who've departed. They don't take kindly to the curious." Elise nodded politely but didn't take his words to heart. Ian was just a product of the village's superstitions, she told herself. As the day turned to dusk, the village transformed. Shadows lengthened, and the soft golden light gave the dilapidated buildings a somber glow. That night, in the dimly lit room of the inn, Elise developed her photos. The pictures should have shown the decayed charm of Gallow's End, but instead, they revealed figures draped in shadows where no one had stood. Elise's heart skipped a beat. She convinced herself it was just a trick of light, a fault in her vintage camera. The next day, driven by a mix of fear and intrigue, Elise wandered to the village cemetery. It was there, among the neglected and moss-covered headstones, that she found it, a headstone with her own name etched into the weathered stone. Elise Hendrickson, it read, with today's date as the day of her death. A cold dread settled in her chest, her hands trembling. Ian's voice came from behind. "You've seen it, haven't you? The fate that awaits." Elise whirled around, her eyes wide with terror. "This is a joke, right? You set this up to scare me." "No joke, miss," Ian replied, his face a tapestry of sorrow and fear. "This village, it captures souls. Your camera has seen the truth." She wanted to run, to escape the madness that seemed to seep from the very ground of Gallow's End. But her journalist's curiosity anchored her. "What do you mean, captures souls?" she demanded. Ian sat on a crumbling gravestone, his voice beginning the tale Elise would never forget. "Long ago, this village was cursed. A traveler like yourself came through, capturing images of the village and its people. But with each picture he took, a life was claimed by the curse, trapping them in a moment for eternity. They say the curse lives on, seeking those who dare to disturb the peace." Elise's mind raced. It was impossible. It had to be. But the photos, the headstone with her name, they were real. She spent the day with Ian, listening to stories that blurred the lines between legend and reality. As the sun began to set, she decided to try and leave Gallow's End, to escape the growing terror that clawed at her. She packed her bags and hurried through the village, but with each step, the fog grew thicker, the path more convoluted. The village wouldn't let her leave. It was then that Elise realized the inescapability of fate that Ian had spoken of. The village and its curse were inseparable, a single entity of malice. Desperate, Elise raised her camera, thinking if she could just understand the curse, she could find a way to break it. She clicked the shutter, capturing the mist, the houses, the graves. When she developed these last pictures, they showed not just ghostly figures but scenes of the past, of the traveler who brought the curse, of each soul claimed, and in the last photo, an image of herself, standing at the edge of the village, as if caught between worlds. The terror that gripped Elise was no longer just fear. It was resignation to the truth that Ian's tales weren't just stories. They were warnings, preludes to the inescapable fate that now embraced her. Gallow's End was not a place to be captured in photos. It was a place that captured you. The veil between past and present was thin here, and Elise had stepped through it with every picture she took. As the final rays of sunlight disappeared, Elise accepted the melancholy embrace of the village. The camera fell from her hands, its uncanny power spent, its body just as lifeless as the stones it lay upon. Elise's last breath was a whisper that melded with the wind, her spirit just another echo of Gallow's End. And in the village, time moved on, a cycle unbroken, where the whispers of the past warned the living, and the camera lay silent, a relic that saw too much and in the end captured the very soul it was meant to free. The Unholy Game. Alex and Jenna stood at the threshold of the forsaken church in Gallow's End, their hearts beating a reckless rhythm of excitement and fear. They were an unlikely duo, Alex, the teenage daredevil with a taste for adrenaline, and Jenna, the skeptic, her mind a fortress against the town's superstitious whispers. The church loomed over them, a silhouette against the moonlit sky, its spire like a finger accusing the heaven. The air was still, as if waiting for the echo of a long-forgotten hymn. It was the perfect setting for a dare, a test of courage that had lured many but triumphed over all. "Are you ready to play?" Alex's voice was a mix of challenge and anticipation. Jenna rolled her eyes. "The forbidden game is just an old legend, Alex. Nothing's going to happen." The game was simple yet forbidden. A chant to summon the church's guardian entity, whispered only by the most daring or foolish. With a shared glance, they stepped into the hollow sanctuary, their footsteps disturbing years of silence. The game began with a chant, their voices soft but growing bolder with each repetition. As they reached the climax, the air shifted, a chill that seeped into their very bones. A shadow danced at the edge of their vision, formless and silent. Jenna's skepticism wavered. "Did you see that?" Her voice was a whisper of genuine fear. "It's just your imagination," Alex retorted, but his voice lacked conviction. The shadow figures multiplied, fleeting at the corners of their eyes, too many to be dismissed as mere tricks of the light. Their fear escalated to panic as the shadows took form, dark figures that mirrored their movements, taunting them with an unseen presence. The game had awakened something sinister, a darkness that the church had kept chained in its bowels for centuries. "We need to get out of here," Jenna said, her earlier skepticism abandoned in the face of the undeniable. They stumbled toward the exit, but the door slammed shut with an otherworldly force, the echo of the bang a death knell in the silent church. In their frantic search for another way out, they discovered a hidden passage beneath the altar, a narrow, winding staircase that descended into the earth. The underground passage was suffocating, the walls pressing close, and the darkness absolute. Their flashlights flickered over ancient symbols etched into the stone, warnings unheeded. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the weight of despair. As they navigated the oppressive labyrinth, the entity played its sinister game. Jenna's voice called out to Alex from the darkness, luring him deeper into the passage. But Jenna was beside him, her hand gripping his in a vice of terror. Whatever was calling him was mimicking her voice, a ghostly imitation that aimed to divide them. They clung together, their belief in the tangibility of the world around them shaken. The danger of underestimating folklore became a reality they could not deny. The power of their belief, once a shield of skepticism, was now a weapon turned against them, fueling the entity's strength. The passage seemed endless, a maze designed not to confine a beast, but to trap the souls of the living. Whispers filled the air, a cacophony of their own voices, promises of escape that tempted them to let go, to give in. But amidst the chaos of their own echoed fears, a sliver of hope surfaced. The entity fed on belief, on the fears that belief fostered. If they could reject the reality of the entity, perhaps they could weaken it. Jenna, with a courage forged in the heart of her skepticism, began to chant again. Not the forbidden words that had started this nightmare, but words of dismissal, of denial. She denied the entity's existence, its power, its very presence. Alex joined her, their voices rising in a dual incantation of negation. The walls of the passage shivered with their conviction, the whispers of the entity fading into silence. At last, they emerged from the underground passage, not into the church, but into the cool night air of the village. The church stood silent, its doors now open, as if it had never barred their escape. They looked back at Gallow's End, its darkness now just the absence of light, not the presence of something malevolent. The entity had retreated, its power diminished by their disbelief. Shaken, they left the village behind, its tales of terror and whispers of the past a fading nightmare. They had faced the darkest part of Gallow's End and survived. Their friendship a testament to the strength that comes not from fear, but from facing it. And as the first rays of dawn touched the spire of the church, Gallow's End whispered once more, a warning to those who would dare play the games of the forgotten, a warning that would go unheeded until the next thrill-seeker arrived, until the next skeptic dared to question. The village would wait, timeless and patient, for the cycle of belief and fear was unending, and the game, as it was in the beginning, would always find new players. Whispers and warnings. The air in Gallow's End was thick with unspoken tales, whispers of the dead swirling in the mist that blanketed the village like a shroud. Paranormal investigator Richard Sloan had heard the murmurs, the tales that spoke of a place where the veil between worlds was threadbare. Beside him, medium Abigail Lee walked with quiet confidence, her connection to the spirit world a beacon in the oppressive gloom. They had come to communicate with the spirits of Gallow's End, to record evidence of the afterlife that Richard's scientific mind craved. The village, desolate and forgotten by the bustling world, was a perfect canvas for their work. Yet, something in the air suggested that they were the ones being observed, studied by unseen eyes. As they passed the dilapidated houses, Abigail paused, her breath visible in the cold air. "There's a presence here," she whispered, her voice a thread of silk against the coarse backdrop of the village. "It's peaceful, but sorrowful." Richard readied his equipment, the lenses and sensors his talismans against the unknown. He watched as Abigail's eyes closed, her spirit reaching out to the one that lingered. A connection was made, and a message delivered, a warning of a malevolent force that lay in wait, eager for the unwary. The church stood at the heart of the village, its bell tower silent, its doors open as if an invitation. This was where they would hold their seance, where Abigail would bridge the worlds, and Richard would capture the unimaginable. Candles flickered as they began, the light casting shadows that danced with macabre grace. Abigail's voice rose and fell in an ancient cadence, reaching out to those who had passed. The peaceful spirit came first, its presence a light touch against their minds, a whisper of thanks for hearing its plight. But the seance turned violent, the candles snuffed out by an unseen force as a cold wind howled through the open doors. The entity took physical form, a swirling mass of shadows with eyes that burned with malice. It was ancient, a darkness that had festered in the village's heart, its power woven into the very stones of the church. Richard's equipment, designed to capture ghostly whispers and spectral images, now recorded a more sinister spectacle. His monitors flickered with otherworldly light, and his audio devices captured a voice, a spectral message that chilled the blood. "Leave this place," the voice commanded, its tone laced with an urgency that brooked no argument. The guardian stirs. The spirits of Gallow's End, once residents and now ethereal guardians, fought to protect Richard and Abigail. They were flashes of light against the darkness, their presence a barrier between the living and the entity that sought to claim them. Abigail's voice became a chant, a plea for the peaceful spirits to aid them. The church shook with the battle unseen, the air electric with the power of her words. Richard, though a man of science, found himself whispering his own pleas to whatever gods might listen. They fled the church, the entity's rage a tangible force that pursued them. The spirit's protection waned as they crossed the boundary of the sacred ground, their power tethered to the land that held their remains. In the village, Richard and Abigail caught their breath, their bodies trembling with exertion and terror. The equipment that Richard had so carefully calibrated was silent now, its purpose served. The recordings would be analyzed, scrutinized for evidence of the otherworldly encounter. But as they left Gallow's End, a final message played from the audio device, a spectral whisper that bore the weight of a timeless warning. "The Guardian is awake," it said, and the silence that followed was more terrifying than any threat. The duality of the spirit world had been laid bare before them, a realm where peace could walk hand in hand with unspeakable evil. Their attempt to communicate had stirred the ancient demonic force, a consequence they had not intended but now could not ignore. Richard and Abigail left Gallow's End with more than evidence. They carried with them a burden, a knowledge that some places were meant to be left in silence, some whispers left unheeded. The spirits had attempted to protect them, but now the guardian of Gallow's End was awake, its gaze turned outward, searching for new souls to entwine in its dark embrace. And in the village, the candles flickered once more in the church, lighting of their own accord. The spirits whispered amongst themselves, a lament for the peace that had been broken. Gallow's End waited, its story unfolding with each unwary visitor, its whispers a warning that few would heed until it was too late. The cycle of Gallow's End. In the hush of the local archives, history professor Lucas Grant and Evelyn Price, a passionate local historian, pored over dusty tomes and brittle maps of Gallow's End. They were drawn together by a shared obsession, the curse that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat beneath the village's history. Their latest discovery was a cryptic journal, penned by the village's enigmatic founder. The looping script spoke of rituals and celestial events, of a darkness that demanded to be fed by the cycle of the village sorrow. It was a historian's goldmine and a chilling testament to the curse that seemed more than mere superstition. As they translated the archaic language, Lucas and Evelyn felt the thrill of intellectual pursuit. But outside the safety of the archives, the village bore witness to a disturbing pattern. Disappearances, ones that mirrored the vague and ominous events described in the journal, were occurring again. Each vanishing was a shadow on the wall, a dark echo of the past. The sense of existential horror grew as the two historians dug deeper into the journal. They unearthed a timeline, a sequence of events that led to calamity every time it concluded, and the cycle, as they soon realized with a growing sense of dread, was nearing its next zenith. They tried to warn the villagers, but their words were met with dismissive shakes of the head and the doors closing in their faces. The curse of Gallow's End was an old story, too ancient to be more than a ghost tale to scare children. But the journal was more than a record. It seemed to be an active participant in the unfolding horror. The ancient runes that dotted its pages began to appear throughout the village, etched in blood against the stones and trees. With every rune found, the atmosphere thickened, the sky above the village darkened, as if the very cosmos were conspiring to close the loop of the cycle. As the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, Lucas and Evelyn found themselves not as observers of history, but as its potential victims. The curse was not just a cycle, it was a trap, one that snared the unwary, those driven by the pursuit of knowledge. Lucas looked out at the village square from the archives window, his gaze tracing the runes that now seemed to emerge from the very earth itself. "It's a warning," he said, his voice a whisper of realization. "The cycle, we're meant to stop it. But how?" Evelyn's eyes were wide with fear as she scanned the journal's final entry. "We don't stop it," she murmured. "We complete it. We're not just researchers, we're part of it." The final rune appeared on the church door, glowing with an otherworldly light as the sun began to set. The village was silent, too silent, as if it were holding its breath. Lucas and Evelyn understood. They were to be the next to disappear, to become another unsolved mystery, another part of the village's haunted landscape. The curse of Gallow's End was not just a series of unfortunate events. It was a conscious, malevolent force that required the sacrifice of those who dared to unveil its secrets. The more they knew, the deeper they were entangled in its web. As the clock tower chimed the hour, Lucas and Evelyn felt the weight of history upon them. Their curiosity, once a flame that illuminated the dark, now felt like a beacon that drew the shadows ever closer. With resolve, they took up the journal and walked together to the church. If they were to disappear, they would do so on their terms, facing the darkness with eyes wide open. They would leave behind their own record, an addition to the journal, a new chapter that would warn the next seekers of truth. The village of Gallow's End watched in silence as the door to the church closed behind them. Inside, the echo of their voices reciting the ancient runes mingled with the shadows. And then there was silence. And when the villagers finally dared to open the church doors, Lucas and Evelyn were gone. The journal lay open on the altar, its pages fluttering in a breeze that smelled of ancient earth. On the last page, in Lucas's neat script, were the words, "The cycle continues, but let this be a guide for those who follow. Beware the curse of knowledge, for it is the food that feeds the darkness of Gallow's End." Outside, the runes faded from sight, but their power lingered, a testament to the cyclical nature of history and the fine line between ignorance and the perilous pursuit of knowledge. Gallow's End would remember, in whispers and in silence, waiting for the cycle to begin anew. Echoes of Gallow's End. Maribeth's heart fluttered with a mix of excitement and unease as she stood before the dilapidated house that was now, unbelievably, hers. The property, a legacy from a distant relative she barely remembered, loomed over Gallow's End with its darkened windows like sightless eyes. Her husband, Dean, a man of logic and reason, offered a reassuring smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Renovations began under a cloud-draped sky, the old house creaking and groaning as if protesting against the intrusion. As walls were stripped and floors pried up, Maribeth stumbled upon a hidden compartment containing a diary, its pages yellowed with age. The diary belonged to a woman who lived in the house a century prior. And as Maribeth read the entries, an eerie sensation washed over her. This woman's life, her dreams, and fears seemed to mirror Maribeth's own. The house, with its peeling wallpaper and echoing halls, felt alive with whispers of the past. Objects began to move inexplicably. A picture frame would appear on the opposite side of the room. A vase of flowers would find its way to the floor, petals scattered like silent screams. Driven by an otherworldly compulsion, Maribeth traced the trail of these displaced objects to a secret room, sealed behind a false wall. The air was thick with the scent of old perfume and whispers of forgotten conversations. It was a perfectly preserved parlor, a snapshot of a bygone era, yet it felt strangely familiar to Maribeth. As days slipped by, Dean watched with growing concern as his wife's behavior became increasingly bizarre. She would drift through the rooms, her hands tracing the antique furniture, her eyes distant. Maribeth's voice, when she spoke, took on a cadence that wasn't her own. It was as if the woman from the diary was reawakening, using Maribeth as a vessel. At night, the house came alive with the echoes of its past residents. Maribeth and Dean, trapped in a haunting play, found themselves reenacting scenes straight from the pages of the diary. They argued with fervor they didn't feel, danced to music that wasn't playing, and whispered secrets in the dead of night. The overlapping of past and present lives became increasingly pronounced, with Maribeth fading into the persona of the diary's author. Her once modern clothes were replaced with the high collars and long skirts of a century ago. Dean tried to reach her, to remind her of who she was, but Maribeth was slipping away, her identity being buried under the weight of history. Haunted by the realization that his wife was becoming a stranger, Dean searched desperately for a way to break the connection. He scoured the diary for an answer, for any clue that could save Maribeth from being consumed by the life of another. The answer came on a stormy night when lightning illuminated the diary's final entry, a plea from the woman of the past, trapped within the walls of her own home by an unyielding love and a tragic demise. It was not the house that was haunted, but the diary itself, an anchor holding the woman's spirit in a perpetual cycle of her last days. Dean, driven by love and fear, made a choice. He took the diary and set it ablaze in the fireplace of the secret parlor. The flames consumed the pages, and as they did, the house shook with the force of a pent-up storm breaking free. Maribeth collapsed, the spirit that had been merging with her own screaming its way out of her body, its hold broken by the burning of its last tie to the world. Dean rushed to her side, cradling his wife as the echoes of the past faded into silence, the house settling into a peaceful quiet for the first time in a century. When the morning came, the sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled light on the house that no longer watched over Gallow's End with dark intentions. Maribeth, her eyes clear and her own once more, stood hand in hand with Dean, ready to rebuild not just the house, but their lives. Yet, as they left the parlor, a cold spot lingered by the fireplace, a silent reminder that history never truly dies in Gallow's End. It simply waits, an echo of lives once lived, for someone to listen once more. Whispers in the Ruins. Mia and Elliot, armed with the immortal courage of childhood, ignored the stern warnings of their parents and ventured towards the ruins that perched on the edge of Gallow's End. The sun hung low, casting elongated shadows that turned the ruins into a playground of ghosts. Their game was simple: pretend. They were explorers in a long-forgotten land, kings and queens of old, warriors of legend. But as they delved deeper into the broken skeleton of a once vibrant village, their game unearthed a relic of the past. A doll, its glassy eyes and cracked porcelain skin were seated upon a throne of rubble. Elliot, the younger and more sensitive of the two, hesitated, sensing a silent scream in the stillness of those lifeless eyes. Mia, with the fearless invincibility of an elder sister, scoffed and placed the doll atop a fallen beam, proclaiming it the guardian of their imaginary kingdom. As the evening crept upon them and the sky bled into a tapestry of purples and blues, a chilling wind whispered through the ruins. It was then that the children's innocent laughter was met with another, a child's giggle, not belonging to either of them, curling around the pillars and through the broken archways. Elliot clutched Mia's arm. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice a mix of excitement and fear. "It's just the wind," Mia replied, though her heart had begun to race. The game shifted, the air tinged with an unspoken urgency. "Let's play hide and seek," Mia suggested, and before Elliot could agree, she turned away to count. 1, 2, 3. Elliot hid behind a crumbling wall, his breath held tight in his chest. But as Mia's counting reached 10, it wasn't her voice that called out to him. It was a whisper, a ghostly child's voice, inviting him to play forever in the ruins. The children found themselves caught in a looping game of hide and seek. The ghostly child always one step ahead, its laughter echoing from the stones. They hid under arches, behind statues, in the shadows of what were once homes, but the game continued, and the sky darkened. Fear replaced the thrill of the game. No matter where they hid, the ghostly child found them, its giggles growing louder, closer, never seen but always felt. The ruins became a labyrinth, their familiar paths twisted and strange. Mia and Elliot huddled together, realizing the only way to end the game was to break its rules. They must not hide, they must seek the one who was calling them. Together, they followed the whispers, the laughter leading them to the heart of the ruins where the doll sat, its eyes seeming to follow their every move. With trembling hands, Mia reached for the doll, its glassy eyes now flickering with a sinister light. "I found you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A silence, heavy and absolute, fell upon the ruins. The doll's eyes dimmed, its power broken. The children, released from the game's sinister grip, ran from the ruins, not stopping until the comforting lights of their homes pierced the encroaching night. That evening, as their parents tucked them into bed, relief washed over the families of Gallow's End. But in the stillness of the night, the villagers heard the distant sound of children's laughter, the echoes of a game that had almost claimed two more. The ruins, now quiet, watched over the village, a warning of the perils of curiosity and the price of innocence lost. For in the game of hide and seek with a ghost, the next hiding place might just be beyond the veil, in a world where playtime lasts forever. Echoes of the Damned. In the silent embrace of Gallow's End, Thomas Wright, a horror author with a hunger for the macabre, sought the whispers of inspiration among the desolate stones. His guide, Eliza, a young local with eyes like storm clouds, moved among the ruins as one might in a house they wished they had never called home. The atmosphere in the village was thick, the air holding its breath, the ground saturated with untold stories. Eliza's reluctance was a tangible shroud. Her every step a story she dared not tell. "Why so silent, Eliza?" Thomas probed as they walked, his voice a gentle nudge against her reticence. "It's not the speaking that I fear, Mr. Wright," she whispered. "It's what will answer back." As the days bled into nights, Thomas's pen began to dance with fervor, ink flowing like the blood of Gallow's End's forgotten tales. The stories that emerged were not his own but belonged to the spirits that clung to Eliza's shadow, a literary seance that he could not control. The narrative spun tales of an ancestral curse, one that had wrapped Eliza's lineage in chains of despair. The house where she dwelled alone stood as a silent testament to her family's dark legacy, its very foundation a chronicle of horrors untold. One night, guided by the whispers in his head, Thomas and Eliza descended into the bowels of her forsaken home. Behind a wall, disguised by years and ivy, they found the heart of Eliza's dread, a chamber untouched by time, adorned with relics of rituals and worship to the village's dark history. The room welcomed them with an air of expectance, as if it had lain in wait for the rightful heirs of its secrets. And there, amidst the shadows and echoes of chants long silenced, Thomas's latest piece unfolded before their eyes. It was not written by his hand, yet it bore his name, a foretelling of doom that threatened to leak from the pages into their reality. Eliza's voice broke the silence, her tone a mix of awe and horror. "The stories, they are alive, aren't they? You're writing, it's not fiction. It's a prophecy." Thomas, with eyes wide and mind reeling, could only nod. His words, once a source of pride, now formed a tapestry of terror, predicting a series of ominous events that mirrored the misfortunes of Eliza's ancestors. The curse was not content with the past, it hungered for the present, and they were to be its feast. In a desperate bid to break the cycle, Thomas urged Eliza to confront the specters of her lineage. As they recited passages from the prophetic writings, the spirits manifested, twisted visages of anguish, each a bearer of the family's cursed legacy, reaching out to claim Eliza as their own. The chamber became a vortex of spectral lights and wails, a hurricane of retribution. Eliza, with a strength born of generations of suffering, stood her ground. "I am not my ancestors," she declared, her voice a defiant blade cutting through the darkness. "Their sins are not my shackles." With each word spoken, the spirits wavered, the chamber's grip loosened, and the curse recoiled, its power dwindling as the truth of Eliza's declaration took hold. The writing on the walls, once an ominous script, faded, and the chamber began to crumble, the relics of the past turning to dust. As dawn broke over Gallow's End, the house stood silent, the chamber beneath it a forgotten nightmare. Eliza, with a spirit cleansed of her family's past, looked upon the ruins of the village with new eyes. Thomas, his muse now silent, realized that the true story of Gallow's End was not one of horror, but of liberation. The novel he would write would speak of a young recluse named Eliza, who faced the echoes of the damned and emerged not as a character in a tale of terror, but as a heroine in a story of redemption. And in the heart of the village, where dread once reigned, a new echo arose, not of spirits or curses, but of hope, whispering on the wind that sometimes the most haunting tales are those that end with the breaking of chains. Whispers of Gallow's End. Melissa prided herself on being a rational person, which made her the most charismatic ghost tour guide in Gallow's End. With a skeptic's smile, she narrated the village's chilling legends to wide-eyed tourists, never believing a word. That was until the night she met the man in the cloak. It was a moonless evening when he joined the tour, his presence a silent shadow at the back of the group. As Melissa spun tales of the undead, the man's eyes, dark and knowing, seemed to pierce the veil between the living and the dead. The village founder, they say, could command the spirits, Melissa recited with a theatrical flair, unaware of the guest's lineage. The cloaked figure stepped forward, his voice a whisper that cut through the night. Command them. No, he was at their mercy, just like us. His words, though barely audible, sent a shiver through the group. Melissa laughed it off, but a flicker of unease sparked within her. As the night unfurled, the man seemed to disappear only to reappear at pivotal moments of the tour, each time closer to Melissa. As they reached the heart of the village, a dense mist enveloped them. Shapes moved within it, specters of the past enacting their eternal tragedies. Melissa's heart raced. These were not her actors. These were the characters of her stories made flesh and blood. The cloaked guest stood beside her, his eyes reflecting the ghastly scenes. The founder's blood runs through both our veins, he said. You're not just a narrator, Melissa. You're part of the story. Melissa stumbled backward, her mind reeling. Her grandmother's whispered confessions on her deathbed, once dismissed as the ramblings of the old, now rang with terrifying clarity. She was a descendant of the cursed founder, the man who had entwined his lineage with the shadows. The legends she told with such detachment were her heritage. And as the night progressed, the village's spectral residents seemed to recognize her. Phantoms of the past reached out, beckoning her to join them in their eternal lament. Melissa turned to the mysterious guest. His figure blurred within the mist. Why reveal this now? She demanded, her voice trembling. Because the village needs you to acknowledge the curse, he said, his voice echoing from the shadows. To break it, you must confront it, accept it. The tour group had scattered, lost in the fog, leaving Melissa alone with the man who claimed to be her kin. She realized that she was not leading the tour but being led, each step a descent into her own blood-soaked legacy. With each revelation, the spectral performances grew more intense, the village's bloody history replaying with macabre detail. Melissa watched, frozen, as the horrors her family had wrought were laid bare. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the mist cleared. The ghostly actors vanished, leaving an oppressive silence. Melissa stood alone in the village square, the man nowhere to be seen. Her disbelief had been a shield, but now, with the truth of her ancestry laid bare, the shield was shattered. Gallow's End had opened its heart to her, showing her the reality behind the legends she had so often scoffed at. As dawn broke, Melissa made her decision. The tour would end, but her quest was just beginning. She would delve into her family's history, uncover every secret, and face the curse head-on. For she was Melissa of Gallow's End, the last of the founder's line, and she would not let the shadows claim her as they had claimed so many before. The village would find peace, not through fear and ghost stories, but through the courage of one who had once disbelieved. And in the years to come, new tales would be told of the night when the tour guide became part of the legend, and how she faced the whispers of Gallow's End with an open heart and a defiant spirit. Beyond the Veil of Salt, in the heart of Gallow's End stood a quaint little shop that beckoned the forlorn and the desperate with the promise of otherworldly connection. It was here that Sarah, a silhouette of sorrow, sought the services of Madame Morale, a medium known for piercing the veil between the living and the dead. Sarah's heart was a bramble of grief since the death of her beloved husband. She longed for one last whisper, one final goodbye. Madame Morale, with her eyes like lanterns in the fog, had assured her that the bonds of love could reach beyond the grave. The night of the séance was moonless, the air pregnant with anticipation. Madame Morale arranged the room meticulously, with a circle of salt as the boundary between worlds. It was a fortress in granules, a protection against the unknown. Candles flickered as Sarah and the medium took their places within the circle, hands clasped, breaths held in a ballet of hope and fear. Madame Morale's voice, rich and otherworldly, called to the spirits, her words painting Sarah's longing in the ether. Spirit of the one Sarah holds dear, hear our call and draw near, intoned Madame Morale. The air tightened, the candle flames danced wildly, and a cold wind circled the room. A figure appeared, a ghostly imprint of Sarah's husband. Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks as she reached out, her fingers trembling. Michael, she whispered, the name a talisman against the engulfing darkness. But the séance stirred more than just her beloved spirit. Shadows crept closer to the salt barrier, whispers multiplied, and the temperature dropped into a chill of despair. Madame Morale's voice wavered as she sensed the intrusion of unwanted entities. Sarah, lost in her yearning, broke the circle to touch her husband's apparition. The salt line scattered, a breach in the fortress. In the wake of her actions, a torrent of spirits surged through, a cascade of the lost and the damned. The medium's eyes blazed with fear and recognition. These were spirits she had encountered before, spirits that had a history with Gallow's End, and with her own tragic past. She had come to the village to escape the ghost of her daughter, who she had tried and failed to resurrect years ago. Seal the circle, Madame Morau's voice thundered, but it was too late. The room was a tempest of spectral cries, the air a canvas for the tormented souls of the village. Sarah saw her husband's apparition contort in agony, his face no longer just his own, but a mask of countless others. The seance had become a doorway, and in their quest for a single voice, they had opened it to a chorus of anguish. The spirits swirled around Sarah, their whispers clashing into a cacophony of grief. Her heart broke for them, for her husband, for herself. The agony of holding on clashed with the terror of letting go. Madame Morau, realizing the cost of her ambition to defeat death, channeled all her energy, invoking every protective charm she knew. The spirits recoiled as she rebuilt the barrier, her own spirit resonating with the power of her love and her loss. By the ties that bind and the love that remains, I command thee, return to the plane of shadows, she cried. With a final, ear-splitting wail, the spirits retreated, sucked back into the void they had come from. The candles extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. When the lights returned, the air was clear, but the weight of what had happened pressed heavily in the room. Sarah sat, motionless, her heart aching in a way that was new and raw. Madame Morau, with eyes dimmed by exhaustion, whispered a sorrowful apology. She had wanted to give Sarah peace but had instead brought forth a maelstrom. As the sun rose, casting light on the havoc, Sarah understood the danger of dwelling on what's lost. Her desire to reconnect had opened a portal that was better left closed. She had sought closure, but in its pursuit, had found chaos. In the aftermath, Sarah's journey through grief changed. She found solace in the memories she carried, the love that was shared, and the acceptance that some farewells were silent. The circle of salt, once broken, was now a circle of healing in her heart. And Madame Morau, faced with the echoes of her past, embraced her own need for forgiveness. Gallow's End, with its whispers and shadows, held them both in its history, reminding them that some doors, once open, demand the greatest of sacrifices to be closed. Live stream of the damned. The village of Gallow's End was a place forgotten by time, but Kayla and Shane aimed to thrust its chilling tales into the digital age. With their camera gear and eager online followers, they set out to live stream a night in the village, seeking to capture undeniable proof of the paranormal. Their venture began with a flippant tone, as they cracked jokes and teased about the so-called curses and hauntings. Their followers ate it up, flooding the chat with emojis and dares. The air of modern irreverence was tangible as they walked the cobblestone paths, their cameras streaming every moment. As night fell, the lighthearted banter faded. The first sign of trouble was a flicker in their equipment, screens glitched, and battery levels drained rapidly. Shane's normally steady hand faltered as an unexplainable chill swept through them. "Did you see that?" Kayla gasped, pointing to a shadow that darted across the screen. The chat exploded with viewers retelling what they'd glimpsed. A shape, a face, something not quite human. Eager to keep their audience engaged, they followed the apparitions into the heart of the village, the churchyard, where ancient stones leaned heavily with the weight of time. Here, the air buzzed with unseen energy, and the poltergeist activity began. Tombstones trembled, and the gates creaked open and shut as if greeting unseen visitors. Shane's laughter turned to curses as his camera spun from his grasp, seemingly yanked by invisible hands. Online, their followers were a mix of skeptics and believers, their comments a cascade of fear and fascination. The chat dared them to venture deeper into the crumbling church itself. Kayla and Shane, driven by the allure of viral fame, pushed open the heavy wooden door. The moment they entered, the live stream warped, showing images of the past, a time when the church was filled with whispers of witchcraft and the cries of the unjustly accused. Their equipment buzzed with the distorted sounds of old hymns and anguished pleas. The viewers were enraptured, their screen filled with the overlapping timelines of Gallow's End. Kayla and Shane, however, were not watchers but unwilling participants in a history repeating itself. As they stood at the pulpit, a figure manifested before them, a priest from another era, his eyes hollow with condemnation. The specter reached out, and Shane stumbled back, his camera capturing the moment his laughter died. Their final live stream was a harrowing tableau of old-world horror clashing with modern reality. The entity, a relic of the village's tormented legacy, moved towards them, its intent clear. This was no spectacle. This was survival. Shane's shouts for Kayla to run were punctuated by the sound of the church bells tolling, not heard for a century. The followers, once amused, now watched in horror. Their comments pleas for the duo to escape. In the final frames of the stream, Kayla turned the camera upon herself, her face a mask of fear, and behind her, the church dissolved into a vision of its own fiery destruction from long ago. The chat was silent, the emojis gone, replaced by the stark reality that they had witnessed something beyond entertainment. The stream cut abruptly, leaving only a screen filled with digital static and the echo of Kayla's final scream. The footage, once thought to be the key to their fame, became evidence of their disappearance. The documentarians had sought to capture the supernatural, to make spectacles of suffering for the world to see. Instead, they became part of the village's legacy, their own story enshrined in the annals of Gallow's End. Their followers, once eager for thrills, were left with the voyeuristic guilt of having witnessed true horror unfold in real time. The village reclaimed its secrets, and the streams of the damned played on, looping endlessly in the digital ether, a haunting reminder that some legacies refuse to be forgotten, even as the screen fades to black.